Are you really an entrepreneur, or are you actually a business owner? Being an entrepreneur isn't everything people think it is. It's not like the badge of honor. It's actually a blessing and a curse. I see business owners and entrepreneurs that are operating like headless chickens and firefighting everything. They are one thing on paper, but they're behaving and operating like another. So I think we do need to address that inner stuff. It's not just about building a business, it's about building a life. This is the Born to be Brilliant podcast, helping you harness the habits and unlock the tools to bring you more meaning, vibrance, and the personal power to help you shine like the diamond you are. Everyone talks about being an entrepreneur like it's the ultimate badge of honor. But here's the question. Are you really an entrepreneur, or are you actually a business owner? Or maybe you've just created yourself a job. In this episode, I'm going to break down the differences, the myths, and the hidden truths of entrepreneurship, the parts nobody talks about. We'll explore what really defines an entrepreneur, the unique challenges of doing it while raising a family, and the surprising overlap between entrepreneurship and ADHD. By the end, you'll have a clear picture of where you fit on this spectrum, and more importantly, how to thrive in a way that works for you. So let's delve right on in. How can you tell if you really are an entrepreneur? And do you even really want to be? It's a word that gets thrown around and used really casually, but also almost a bit too glamorously, I think. And what does that actually mean? I mean, there's the definition of entrepreneur, but then contextually, it's actually quite different. I think it's glamorized a lot. And in fact, actually, a recent post I saw by a well-known entrepreneur was brilliant in that it shared the less glamorous side and actually almost this sort of message of, hey, look, being an entrepreneur isn't everything people think it is. It's not like the badge of honor, like, oh yeah, I'm an entrepreneur. Like, oh, this is so great. It's actually a blessing and a curse. But is it something you can become, or is it something that you are born with? Is it a job role, or is it a personality type? And this is something I've been reflecting on and want to open the conversation about, because most of our listeners probably do identify as entrepreneurs or want to be entrepreneurs, or maybe not. Maybe you've moved past and into that sort of like, no, I'm really not an entrepreneur. Actually, I'm a business owner and I'm owning that. Like, what are the differences? So let's just break it down, shall we? A little bit. What is the difference? What's a business owner? So somebody who's a business owner owns a business. That's what they do. They own a business. Now, they may be an owner-operator. If they're an owner-operator, then there's somebody who owns that business and runs that business. So that quite often that could be a solopreneur. That could be even, an independent hairdresser is an owner-operator. They own the business. It's their business, but they're the one doing the doing. They're the one operating it. They're the one delivering services, and it's all solo. I wouldn't consider that to be an entrepreneur. So you could then take that up a level, and you may be a business owner that works in some way in a business but doesn't do the whole thing by themselves, perhaps as a team. Or you could go one step further and be a business owner who has nothing to do with the day-to-day running of the business. They're just an owner. They own part of it or all of it, but they don't actually run the thing. And that can be huge. That could be a huge, huge business. It could be multi-millions, or it could be a small business. But the point is that at that point, they're a business owner. Does that make them an entrepreneur? There could be some crossover going on there. Maybe. It sort of depends again then on their identity and what else there is about them. Lots of people think that you're an entrepreneur if you have lots of businesses. So, the old classic Del Boy style, fingers in pies everywhere, and always starting something else, or just having lots of businesses can often be seen to be entrepreneurial. And yes, it is. And maybe you can be an entrepreneurial business owner. But is an entrepreneur a thing? Is it even a thing? Well, yeah, it is. It is a thing. And it's usually defined by somebody who is a visionary leader that will see how something can be done and will start the thing. And they're a starter. And that's, in a nutshell, like the framework of it. But lots of people will maybe touch on that stuff and then they go into being a business owner by default. And sometimes people do that and they actually go into creating themselves a job. So I would consider them more self-employed. So that hairdresser analogy, the hairdresser that works for themselves, really, they're self-employed with a job. They're not even, I don't think, properly at the business owner level, because yes, they own it, but that's just by default because there is only them. But they're a sole trader probably, or even if it is a company, they are they've got themselves a job. They're a self-employed person with a job, and the job is the thing that they do. I think there are lots of people out there kind of wearing the entrepreneur title who actually are self-employed people with a job. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. You can build very lucrative businesses by doing that. And that's absolutely fine. That's absolutely brilliant. You know, I know people who do 500,000, even into the millions with that kind of model. And that's great. And if you're happy and that works for you, that's absolutely brilliant. I think it's really important to be mindful, though, of how that looks and how scalable that is. And again, are you happy with that? The entrepreneurial side may then come in when you start taking the financial reward of that job you've created for yourself, and then you start investing that into other things, businesses or properties or other investments that then generate additional revenue streams, and that then takes you more into being an entrepreneur. And if that started by giving yourself a job because no one else was going to give it to you, or you were never going to get paid as much as you're going to get paid by doing it yourself, then great, take that initiative, go do it, go and do it for yourself. But don't do it under any illusion that it's going to be easier. It will probably be harder. But yes, the reward could be greater. So if you're highly skilled at something, and you know, if you're listening to this, you probably are in business and not employed in a job somewhere. But maybe you're exploring the idea. So, you know, whatever stage you're at, if you're highly skilled at something, are you best off putting that skill into your own business or taking that skill to someone else's business and getting paid to do it? And the answer to that is it depends. What kind of life do you want? And how much does it mean to you? What's the purpose? If it's about getting compensated well enough that you can do that thing that you're highly skilled at, maybe you are lucky enough to enjoy it as well, and then you can just live your life and you have enough money to do the things you want to do, it buys you enough freedom and choices that you're happy with, then if somebody else will pay you for that and offer you a certain element of security, and God, even better, a certain amount of stake in maybe that business, then you're onto a winner, because you've then not got all the headache and responsibilities and challenges of actually being a business owner, or even more so being an entrepreneur. Like the challenges that come with that are high. However, if you have the wherewithal to take that skill and expertise and, you know, even passion for what you do, and turn that into a business that is yours, that you do own, and that you can then reap a higher level of compensation for than you would if somebody else were paying you for it, then yes, that's a good idea to do that. But be aware from the get-go, am I buying myself a job? And is the work involved in being my employer and my worker? You know, do I have capacity to do all of those things? And what's my growth plan? You know, is there a ceiling to this? And is that ceiling okay? Am I okay with that ceiling? Is that enough? Or does it keep me boxed and contained? And is there another level I need to go to? So I think it is about like considering all of those things before going into business, because honestly, not everybody should go into business. Not everybody is made for it. I believe that I am a born entrepreneur. It's in my DNA, and I'll talk about that and explain what that might look like for you in a minute. But I think of that as a blessing and a curse, because on the one hand, I feel like I have the ability to see potential and opportunity. I have the ability to innovate and create. And I've got myself into that place of having the freedom to do that. And I think that I've always been that way. Literally, for as far back as I can remember into childhood, I've always been like that. I'm also a self-starter. I'm self-motivated and determined and take self-ownership of my outcomes. So I'll just do what I have to do to find a way. So if something feels like it's impossible, I'll be like, well, it can't be, and there must be a way, And those are all personality traits, right? But they're personality traits that lend themselves really well to entrepreneurship. The curse side of it, so whilst that's great and you can achieve a lot if you are that way inclined, the downside is you almost make yourself unemployable for a start. I don't think I've been employed for more than 21 years now. And I've been an entrepreneur in the professional and being paid sense for 26 years, potentially more now. But 100% I'm unemployable. Like I'm just unemployable completely. And I'm okay with that. But the downside is you do have a hell of a lot of weight to bear. Like you almost like you have to live with this internal drive that you can't shut down because it's who you are at your core. And sometimes you wish for peace and more free space it is really hard to create. Now, not impossible. It's not impossible. You can have it all, by the way. And that's exactly what Want to Be Brilliant is all about. It's about creating that space, having the capacity to be able to be who you are at your core and live the life you love, whilst also being a badass entrepreneur who who gets to create infinite abundance for their pure pleasure, if that's what you want to do it for. And that's something that I will stand firm and say, like, some of the goals I have, like, why? Because I want to. Literally, because I want to. Some people have revenue goals because they have to justify them by need and a reason for that revenue and what that will then do. And that's great to put purpose behind money, but you can also just have it as a goal. And it might just be, I just want to make $1 million just so I can say I did. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think we really have to own and be okay with that, not have to justify it to anyone. But, and it's inevitable. If you do something really good that does make that kind of money, it's going to have an impact. It's going to make a difference in the world, and it's going to have all the other good things about it as a byproduct anyway. So, but if you're, if you're wondering, like, well, was I born an entrepreneur? Did I become one? Because you can become one as well. And I think that you can quite easily not be born an entrepreneur and it not be in your DNA and wiring from as far back as you can remember. But through experiences, you may have been in a corporate world, and it could be through your experience there and seeing what you didn't like. And I can't relate to that because I have never been in that space. But you may have, and you may have come through that. I know lots of entrepreneurs who did leave the corporate world because they didn't like it and there were things that didn't suit them about it. They started businesses, they were innovative, they were determined, and they did figure it out and do what it took. And they learned and became an entrepreneur that way. And that's absolutely possible. I don't think that I don't think it's something you're born as or not. But I do think it's important to get clear on the differences so that you can move forward and create what you want to create. So if you're walking around like you're an entrepreneur, well, are you operating like an entrepreneur? Or are you operating like a business owner? Or are you operating like actually somebody who's created their own job for themselves? Which is, again, like I said, is fine. All of these things are great. There's no hierarchy here. It's not like entrepreneur is the top achievement. And I think that's what it gets painted as. And I think that's dangerous because I think it can make brilliant business owners try to potentially scale too fast or take on too much or diversify too much because they think that's what entrepreneurs do. And it's like, well, wait, is that actually what you want? And is that actually going to get you the outcomes that you're seeking to achieve? Or is the best, are you going to actually earn more money, make more impact, and have a more aligned life that you want to create if you actually just do the job that you've created for yourself and do that really flipping well. Like, that might be the best thing. I also think that it can create ideas of extreme wealth really fast and easily. So you see entrepreneurs who are hugely successful, and sometimes it looks like they sprung up out of nowhere. And I promise you, they didn't. They've put in years and years of grind before you even knew they were around. But it can create this illusion, and there's this sort of like the dream, and then people will shoot for that when actually that's perhaps not what's best for them, and perhaps they don't have what it takes. And again, that's not in a bad way. It's because actually what they have and what they do and what they're best at is far more attuned to being awesome as a self-employed business owner, operator. And I see this both like as the founder and owner of a business that's a franchise model. I see franchisees who quite often franchisees. So the very notion of being a franchisee and becoming a franchisee is a recognition of like, I'm not going to start this thing from scratch, because why would I, when I can become a partner in something that's already really great? But I get a certain amount of autonomy and I get to do what I do best. You do still, as a franchisee in any business, like if you own a franchise, you're going to need to understand business to a certain extent. But again, it does depend on the franchise. You might buy a franchise that you are literally the owner. So then you may be an entrepreneur. You may have like 10 businesses, and one of them you're like, oh, I'm going to buy a franchise in that because that's a good investment. And you fully staff it and you fully equip it, and you don't actually work in it at all. It's just something you own. It's an asset. Or you may be an owner operator. So you buy the franchise because of the passion you have for the thing that you do. And we see this with those that go into activity franchises, coaching franchises, sports ones, all sorts, where they have a skill and they want a business where they get to do that skill, but they get to have a business doing it, but they have every intention of actually doing it. And that's what they do best. And maybe they're not so strong on the business side, which is why being in part of a franchise can be so good for that. But at the same time, lots of franchise owners have multiple franchises as well in different things. So there's that too, and they say it's easier to build a big business than a small business, or to have a piece of a bigger business and be part of it. Like, I think it's better to have a smaller piece of a bigger pie. I heard that I believe Jeff Bezos owns, is it 7% of Amazon or something? Don't quote me on that. Literally something I heard recently. But I'm pretty sure that you'll find that some of the biggest business owners out there with huge brands, they definitely don't own 100% of it. They own a piece of it. Wouldn't you rather own a piece of Meta than try and start up something that's even remotely similar? Like, no brainer. So yeah, I think this is just an interesting topic to consider and to understand where you not only are, but where you're going, or where you want to go. Like, it could be a pivot. You might have been, playing around in entrepreneurship and go, actually, it's not for me. I think that I would be far better owning the identity of a business owner, or owning the business owner crosses over a little bit, but owning the identity of an owner operator who does what I do. Like, I have a job, I do this is my service. This applies massively to coaches. In the coaching industry, most people who are coaching are doing a job because they are delivering that service. And so they have a business that they own and they do that job in that business. If they're a pure business owner, they won't be doing the delivery of the job or the service. They will just own the business, and then they'll probably have a role in that. So they may be in marketing, they may be in leadership, or some form of management, or they may be senior exec or non-exec or whatever they may be. They own it, but they're not operating it day to day. It runs without them. If your business doesn't run without you, you do have a job in that business in some way or another. So yeah, recognizing what that means and what that looks like, and where's that going, and what's next for you, and what the ambition is. So it's knowing where your skill sets are and how to best apply them. So we've defined those terms. Like, we've looked at like whether we've created a job for ourselves and what we want to do and what's next. Let's just look at this thing I said about, is it a personality type? or is it an identity? And I think that the personality traits that you'll see in entrepreneurs are things like risk taking. Entrepreneurs are usually not risk adverse. Some will take more calculated risks than others, but ultimately risk taking is an innate part of entrepreneurship. Creativity, the ability to innovate, to see possible ways of doing things that maybe aren't already spelt out, thinking outside of the box, thinking differently, being creative. And then there's resilience. You need to be resilient, to be honest, to be in business, but entrepreneurs will always be, will be resilient. I think that as an entrepreneur, you live through a lens of seeing things a certain way, and it is not something you clock off from like you do in a job. So you don't go, yeah, that's it, I'm done, and you go home and you switch off, or you're off work. It's a way of, it's in your personality in that you can't clock off from it. So you'll have ideas when you're off, or you'll see something when you're out socializing, like it's a lens. As I say, it's literally a lens, and it's a way in which you see the world. And that, as I said, is like a gift and a curse. So for you, is entrepreneurship something you do, or is it something you are? How does that feel when I ask that question? That's something I'd be really curious to know. Like, do you think it's something you do, or is it something you are? What makes somebody an entrepreneur? Is it the job title, the personality type, or is it something deeper? It's not a qualification. You don't suddenly go, oh, yes, you've passed that level, now you're an entrepreneur. Or, oh, you haven't quite become this, so you're in the entrepreneur bracket. Like, I don't know. It's not a qualification. Economists will tell you that it's a person who takes risks, builds ventures, creates something from nothing. And that's all technical, textbook style definition. And I love that. That's great, sure. But if we look closer, the personality wiring is the one who can't help but spot the opportunities, the one who's willing to take the risks, who gets restless when things stay the same. And some people are just born with that spark. And then let's just talk, and I'm going to talk about that in a correlation to ADHD in a minute, because I know that our ADHD entrepreneurs will be going, is that? Is it just an ADHD business owner that becomes an entrepreneur? And yet, I'd also argue entrepreneurship becomes an identity because it's not just something that you do. Like we said, it's who you actually are. So you start to see the world differently, even if you didn't always. If you become, if it's something that you move into, you start to see the world differently. Every gap is an opportunity. Every challenge is a puzzle that you want to solve. It's not like you can't help yourself. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not really a choice. And this is where so often entrepreneurs end up spread too thinly. So I'm going to touch on the ADHD aspect of this, because I think we also need to look at that, the allure versus the reality. So the Instagram myth idea of an entrepreneur is, laptop lifestyle, travel, freedom, loads of money. Like, any great business owner can portray that lifestyle. Any great high-performing corporate person can portray that lifestyle. Like, that's not an entrepreneur exclusively. The reality is difficult time switching off, working a lot of long hours, blurred boundaries. I'll talk about that as well in motherhood. Bigger challenges as you grow. Like, it doesn't get easier. Actually, it gets harder. The challenges get harder. The bigger you grow, the bigger impact you have, the more shit you have to deal with. Like, and that's part of business. Is that what you want? Is that what you want? Or actually, like, no, just want to keep it simple for a quiet life, thanks. It's like leveling up in the video game. You're going through the video game, and then you get the big boss level, and then you're like, and then you manage to defeat the big boss, and then it's like next level, but oh wow, this is harder now in this arena, and then it just gets tougher and tougher and tougher, and bigger monsters to fight as you go through. So I'm gonna just circle back to that ADHD comment. It is a fascinating thread. I find it a fascinating thread because I know a lot of successful entrepreneurs who have ADHD or have been told that they are wired ADHD, and myself included. And I was 40 when I figured it out, just turned 41 when I got the official diagnosis. But I see this all the time, and more and more entrepreneurs are like, oh my gosh, yes, me too, me too, me too. It feels a bit like a, I don't know, gravy train that people are on at the moment. And I'm curious about it, and I'm going to be really transparent, even if it's slightly controversial, in saying, as somebody who has gone through the formal psychiatric diagnosis of ADHD, I still have my curiosities around how certain any diagnosis really can be without a definitive answer, like from a brain scan. Now, I don't know this stuff medically, so I'm not qualified to have a formal opinion, but my own personal view, which is of course valid, and others I know have told me that they have shared view. And even those who haven't been diagnosed with ADHD but definitely identify with the traits will have also said to me that, like, but is it ADHD or is it my personality, and is it entrepreneur type stuff? Now, I, on a former episode of this podcast, spoke to an ADHD expert who would rightly said when it's more than personality, when it's traits that are there repeatedly, they were there in childhood, and they have an impact on your life. And whilst I get that, and that is what the formal diagnosis will look for as well, like it's it's always been there, it's not just popped up and it impacts your life. I'm like, that, but I'm like, that's not enough. Like for me, I'm like, that's not enough to be a determined thing. Like, I don't know. I even challenged the psychiatrist to diagnose me, and I went, well, I think I think you're right, and I think that this diagnosis is correct, but how can you be sure? Because it can also be a lot of other things. Is entrepreneurship, or is an entrepreneurial wired brain so akin to ADHD? Is it, if there were a criteria and you had to answer questions and check boxes, would it be so similar that actually, is it hard to differentiate? I don't know the answer to this, and I really want to know people's thoughts. Now, I know other people who have ADHD that presents differently. I know there are people who have an ADHD form that leans more on the depression side and suffer more with anxiety, depression, and those other challenges that a lot of the entrepreneurs I know, that will pop up now and again, but it isn't really a significant hurdle. And I know people with ADHD that will passionately argue that it's like, no, absolutely not, and it's really debilitating and all those things. And I don't underestimate that for 1 second. And I think that they can often be, they are very closely connected with other neurological wirings types. I don't necessarily say disorders, because I don't believe that it's necessarily a disorder. I think it's potentially a gift in a lot of ways. And you only have to look at some of the most wildly successful people. Whether you like them or not is neither here nor there. Whether you agree with what they do is neither here nor there. But they have had wild success in what they do. And there are so many who are neurodivergent. So I think there's a gift in there. I think we all have like varying degrees of wiring, and I think that it can be triggered. I think that, trauma can play an impact and play a part in it, and can trigger it. And it can, we know that neuroplasticity now means that our brains can literally be rewired. So I don't know the answer, but what I do know is there's a definite correlation between entrepreneurship and, an innate entrepreneur at their core and the traits of ADHD. There is absolutely a crossover, and I would be willing to bet that a large portion of our listeners will be saying, yeah, 100%. I think that I potentially am ADHD as well. What do you think? I'd love to know. Please do comment and share, and open this conversation up more widely, because I would be really curious to know that. But the question is, does being wired ADHD, for example, make a person more likely to become an entrepreneur because perhaps, they're ADHD, so they're a starter, right? They're a creative thinker. They'll go and do the thing that other people won't even get going on, but then they perhaps struggle to finish it. But then they'll start another thing, and that could be likened to entrepreneurship, like lots of things going on. But it could also make somebody less employable. So maybe because of their personality and wiring as ADHD, they are less employable, so they end up carving out their own way. Like, is it that? And is that the leading part here? Or is it that you are born with or develop or whatever, but you have such entrepreneurial energy and personality traits that they just look so much like ADHD, and that there's a crossover? I don't know if there's which came first, the chicken or the egg, or both. It'd be really interesting to know how many other people resonate and understand that. I think it's a really, really curious point. So moving on to the aspects of, so I want to talk about how we manage all of this. How does an entrepreneur not, through, let's say you do identify as an out and out entrepreneur, you're like, this is me to a T, but and you're well aware of the challenges of that. Like I just said, maybe you are such a big thinker and you dare greatly, but you know that comes at the cost of like feeling like there's always too many loose ends or too many threads, taking on too many things. Like I said, blurred boundaries, perhaps not taking enough care of yourself because you're so driven and passionate about what you do. Perhaps the lack of switch off, perhaps that impacts your sleep. Like, entrepreneurial wellness is vital for success. Otherwise, it's like the entrepreneurial implosion. And the business owner, who is not an entrepreneur, but is an amazing business owner, is going to outperform you in terms of living a great life. In fact, the owner-operator is going to have a better life, make more money, and have more joy and freedom than the entrepreneur, who is so caught up in that cycle because of the weight of the inner wiring and personality traits that they have. It's really important that we are aware of these things about ourselves and can take care of them. And knowing that, there are so many layers to this. You've got your subconscious identity, that, you've got that inner child and nervous system wiring from your childhood that's all going to be impacting how you operate day to day. And often those things sabotage us, and we need to actually go in and look at those things and why they happen and what those patterns are and what those triggers are, so that we can fix them up to optimize our output, actually get the results that we really, really wanted, and not get stuck in the, oh yeah, I made loads of money, but I let it all slip through my fingers because deep down I've got some money issues that I've never addressed and didn't even know about. That's such a common one. It's huge. You go, but then you can't, you don't have the capacity to hold the weight of what you end up creating. That's a massive problem that I see over and over again. Now, this can be compounded and 10x'd when you throw motherhood into the mix. How many women who make high multi-six and seven figures as business women, as entrepreneurs, and simultaneously raise children and have children, and when I say children, I mean under the age of 18. How many? The stats for that are so low. The number of women that actually hit seven figures is so tiny anyway, let alone those that are mothers. How many of those successful women, I am talking about monetary success now because it's the success of the business which is measured that way, how many of those women almost either don't make time for or don't prioritize or push back even the thoughts or drive around starting or creating a family? And that's not to say you have to, by the way, like plenty of people don't want to, and that is absolutely a-okay. But how many people do want to and long to and know that that's what they really want, but they're afraid to, or they don't make time to, because they've created this sometimes monster that's running them, and they know they can't let go. They know they can't take their foot off the gas, because if they do, then what happens? What if that level of revenue stops coming in? What if it drops down or drops off? What if everything they know about who they are is suddenly changed? Their whole identity changes. Who are they then? Who are they without the seven-figure business? Who are they, if they become a mother and try to balance that at the same time? And I'll tell you now, if that's you, like, you will become a different person. It's inevitable. You will not be the same person as a mother as you were before. It's impossible. So for those who are, and if you're a mother who has built and grown to seven figures whilst raising children, raise your hand and let me applaud you, because that's not easy, especially if you've been really hands-on and haven't had that much help and weren't born into it and didn't, have it all like on a platter. It's not easy, because things that I believe are high performance habits, things that make successful people really successful in business, are really, really difficult to adhere to as a parent. And I'm going to say parent now, because I'm speaking about motherhood and being a mother as one, but I'm not suggesting this is exclusive to women. This can be, fathers as well, and parents generally, and you can be parents of all different types. But there is something in the wiring of the mother that is unique, but that's probably a different conversation. The point I'm making is there's always an open running app or 10 that are about your children and your family, and you can't close that off. If you're doing something and the phone rings and it's the school, I know some people that don't, but you're gonna take the call. Like, you're gonna be aware. You get off to the start of the day, and whatever interaction happens, it doesn't matter whether this is with your toddler or your teenager, you're carrying emotions, because as a parent, you are responsible for the physical, mental, and emotional well-being of your child until they're an adult. And so that's a massive responsibility. And if you're responsible for that, you're learning as you go. And if you're human, you're going to have days where you go, oh my God, I really messed up today. Or, well, why did I say that? Or I wish I'd responded differently in that situation. Or, and that can chew you up for half a day. Where's your productivity at then? Where's your brain at then? Believe me, it's not on business, because that stuff takes over. It can derail you, and at best. And then there's the interruptions that inevitably come if you are juggling these things. You don't just go to an office, work 9 to 5, switch off and go home, and then go be parent evenings and weekends. Like, it doesn't work that way. Even if you do go to an office and do that, even if you have your child in daycare or school and that's where they go, and you have an external office and you go there and you do your work, or whatever your work is somewhere, you go and do that, and then you finish at a certain time, and then you are with your family evenings and weekends, even if that's your structure in the physical world, I assure you it will not be that simple in your emotional world and in your inner world. You don't switch off from, first of all, the family stuff when you are working. You'll have pockets of great focus and concentration where you're like, they're good, it's fine, and I'm all in on this right now. I'm all in, I'm recording this podcast. But you will have little infiltrations of what's going on with them, and he's like, I just need to make sure about that for tonight, or what have you. And likewise, you don't just switch off from work and go home and be the parent because you're cooking dinner and you go, because I'm an entrepreneur and I just had an idea, and I had an idea while I'm cooking dinner or in the shower or bathing the children or whatever it may be, and you're like, yes, that, and you need to capture it or whatever. You just don't switch off from either. And that's what I mean by blurred boundaries. The line's blurred, and it's really hard to unblur that. Now, I'm a firm believer in boxing time out and sectioning it out so that you've got like, right, this is my free time. I can do what I want with it. This is focus time, and I'm focusing on this project or this activity or this thing, and I'm all in with that, and blinkers, no outside noise. And buffer time, white space as I call it, which is, in case things leak over to different times or something gets a little derailed and you need some buffer time. Like, I firmly believe that we need those components in our diaries. 100% we do. However, the caveat is it doesn't always go to plan. It doesn't, like, even with the buffer time, if I've got a focus day on a particular project, but then I have a child off sick, or gosh, you wake up with a heavy heart about something and you just can't focus. You just can't pull that concentration in. You've got too much internal noise. And what you really need that day is to take a break and go for a walk and recalibrate your nervous system. Like, you don't always get the choice. And I think that goes for everyone, but I think it is heightened for parents. And I think it is especially heightened for mother entrepreneurs. And I am going to be so bold as to say that because I really do believe that. I am one, and I know others, and I see it. And it's a makeup that is like no other. And I also know some incredible male entrepreneurs who can relate to that, but also applaud the females that are mothers, that they can see the breadth of what we do, because it isn't just in the do, it's in the who, and it's in the inner. It's in the inner. It's the way that we feel and operate, and it's so multifaceted. And I will also say that's why, that's why we have both. That's why the world is made up of masculine and feminine, of male and female. They're needed. We need each other. 100% we need each other. Like, the world wouldn't work. Every species has it. There's a reason. It's not just procreation. There's a different way of being wired, and there's jokes about women and multitasking, but there's a reason. Our brains are actually set differently in our heads. The brain is different, and our brains are made, like the left and the right and the crossover works differently in a female brain than in a male brain. It's not just about the other aspects, right? And we have an ability to think across the brain sides and multitask. It's how nature made us. And so that's great. That's a gift. It's a gift and a curse, because it means that we juggle all the things. I think it's important to acknowledge that and appreciate that. Motherhood and entrepreneurship, not easy. Not easy by a long shot. So hats off to all of you who are building multi-6 and 7-figure businesses, and quite frankly, building any kind of business, even if it's a little, kitchen table business that brings you in some money that you can say you brought to the table and feel proud of, doing something you love or that makes a difference in some way. Hats off to you too. This isn't just about big business and numbers. It's about who the entrepreneur is at their core. So that's my piece about motherhood and entrepreneur. I think to wrap things up, I think it's important that we really do look at that inner work, and the inner work that makes sure that we are sustainable as entrepreneurs and that the foundations are solid. It's so important. So right now we're looking at things that really help us work out our identity. What identity are we actually operating in? I see business owners and entrepreneurs that are operating like headless chickens and firefighting everything. And so they are one thing on paper, but they're behaving and operating like another, and they're miserable. So I think we do need to address that inner stuff, and we do need to address our wellness for performance excellence. It's not just about building a business, it's about building a life. It's about creating that inner capacity to hold all of the weight of what you're creating, so you can create something amazing, because that's what you were born for and that's what you're here for. So Whether you are an owner-operator, whether you're a born entrepreneur and you know it, the most powerful thing that you can do is understand your wiring and build accordingly to that wiring. Entrepreneurship can be extraordinary, but it's only when it is aligned to who you are and supported by that inner foundation to actually hold it. So where do you see yourself in this spectrum? Please do tell us in the comments. Reach out to us at Born to Be Brilliant, and I'll see you in the next episode. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and remember, go out there and shine your light bright because you were born to be brilliant.